policies that he's trying to implement. What's your reaction and takeaway from the speech he just made?
I think he made it very clear that this is unacceptable behavior, this type of violence and hate. He was very strong in his words. I also don't think that this is a time...
But are there many sides, Ben, to this? Are there many sides? Because what you just heard from Cornell is he did not call out white nationalists, the KKK. He said, I condemn hate from all sides.
Well, and I think there is a lot of hate from different groups, and his point was very clear that he was condemning those that did these attacks today. And I think his point was very clear that there is a lot of people out there that have a lot of hate and that is unacceptable, and they will be prosecuted and people will be arrested and the police will come after you, and we need to come together as a country. I also don't think this is a time for it to become such a political conversation. That we all need to, I think, take a big, deep breath here and realize there are bigoted, racist, god-awful people in this country. And let's not pour more gasoline on that fire. Let's condemn it. Let's make sure everyone can go home and be safe. And let's make sure that we're not trying to make political statements or attack the president or attack a governor or somebody else for your own personal political gain. I think that's one of the things that bothers me the most about when we see attacks like this.
But Ben, when you hear from somebody on site of this protest participating in the hate that's happening there, David Duke, saying they're trying to fulfill the president's promise, they're bringing politics into it.
David Duke is white trash, and the only reason why David Duke brings up any political leader is because he knows he'll get on TV for it, and then his hate will be broadcast to millions of people, and he accomplished that today. David Duke has been condemned by this president. David Duke has been condemned by literally thousands upon thousands of politicians. David Duke is a nobody in my book, and a has-been, but as every time he walks out there to get himself on TV, he mentions something that connects him to a sitting president, and when he does it, his message gets out to millions of people. I don't care about David Duke. David Duke is a vile, disgusting human being, and I don't think he should have a voice. I don't think he has a voice to that many people, and we certainly shouldn't give him a megaphone when he does say bigoted and racist things. David Duke is a disgusting human being, but let's stop letting him play us by saying, oh, I'm going to talk about Donald Trump, and then all of a sudden we give him a podium to somehow maybe reach another 300 or 400 or 500 racist white people in this country.
But the president did not call out David Dukes, the KKK, white nationalists, white supremacists.
He's already made it very clear during the campaign that he said, I am not David Duke. I don't like him. I don't know him. I don't want to be a part of him. His group is not. I do not accept his endorsement.
We're talking about this movement, Ben, the people who are emboldened right now to have a rally like this, to ram a car into a crowd of people. Anna Navarro, what's your take?
Look, at least Donald Trump said something, right? There's been so many acts of hatred in this country where he has remained shamefully silent. So at least the president at this point has said something. But what he said was severely lacking. First of all, he turned shortly after he talked about Charlottesville, he turned the conversation into all the accomplishments that have happened under his leadership. Today, the focus is on what's happening in America, what is happening in the streets of Charlottesville. He needed to have called out that the plowing of that car into people is a domestic act of terrorism by white supremacists. Damn it, Donald Trump, call a spade a spade. Call white supremacists white supremacists. Call the KKK. Call the neo-Nazis. Call them out by name. The same way that you want to call out Islamic terrorism, and you should call out white supremacist terrorism, because it is just as dangerous to the streets of America.
Ben?
Look, I have no problem with what Anna just said there, and this is where we actually agree. You need to be clear and you need to be blunt, but I also think we don't even know who was driving the car yet. We don't know a lot about the situation, and I think the president made it very clear that what happened today was wrong and that those that were responsible are going to be prosecuted. I think that's the reason why I walked out there in front of that microphone and started the press conference off talking about it. And again, it's easy to always say, well, I want X, Y, and Z. The president condemned what happened today. He said what happened today was wrong. He said those people are horrible human beings, Ben, and there's no place for bigotry.
Your condemnation today is much stronger than what we heard from the president. His was mealy-mouthed and mushy. He did not say the words that America needs to hear. He did not say to them, stop calling out my name, any of you. This is not what I endorse, and you must stop it. He did not say just how strongly he was going to fight about this. And you know what? It took him a really trying to say anything at all. A lot of other political leaders have come out since last night because the disturbing, sad images have been going on since last night. Well, and he remained silent all day while this is going on. He has got a bully pulpit that none of us have, and he needs to use it as the President of the United States.
Guys, let me read what the President said as we work to turn the sound so we don't want to get too far away from the President's words here. He says, "We are closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. It has been going on for a long time in our country, not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. It has been going on for a long, long time. It has not place in America." Cedric, I want to get your thoughts as well.
Well, let me say this first. You know, I've been in law enforcement for over 40 years now, and I've been accused of being a very conservative law enforcement, law and order kind of guy. And I tell you the truth, I am. But here's what I know. As it relates and what my experience of training has taught me. We're about being fair and just to everyone. That's the leadership position that you take, and when you're in a leadership position, that's the oath that you uphold, being fair to everyone. But in this particular case, this is about a group of people who, as of last night and before, staged this violence to take place on the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, period. There is nothing fair and equitable out there. The President of the United States had an opportunity to say to America is that I'm going to ask my Attorney General, me being a deputy mayor, and I'm quite sure this vice mayor would like to do in Charlottesville, and I hope that he does, is request formally from this administration and from Jeff Sessions to investigate this as a hate crime and domestic terrorism. There is sufficient evidence, I would suggest, anecdotally, based on what we're seeing through video, that at least there should be some interest in going after those, regardless of what side of the aisle they may sit on, regardless of what group it may do. But there's clear acts of violence here that were perpetuated in a very hateful way. The President of the United States had an opportunity, our president, all of our presidents, whether we want him to be or not, he is the President of the United States. He had an opportunity to say to this country that I totally oppose these groups. I find them to be deplorable, and they are not what I stand for and this nation to stand for. This was not even a good middle-of-the-road speech, quite frankly.
You think it was that bad?
It was not a good speech. We're talking about evidence that we're looking at every time you turn on your television of these hateful acts.
He did say, I condemn it in the strongest possible terms, this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence.
But this will be remembered as the many sides speech.
Because they go on to say on many sides.
To be clear, unite the right. There may be members of this protest group who are not racist and anti-Semitic, but many of them are racist and anti-Semitic. Right. They are the ones that perpetuated violence today. What we saw on the other side was an attempt to counter-protest them. The counter-protesters, the people that were trying to oppose the racists and the neo-Nazis, are the ones that had a car plowed into them by a driver. Now, thankfully, that driver's under arrest. Hopefully, we'll know more soon about that driver. But I think we can confidently say the goal of these racists is to intimidate, and the goal of the driver was to terrorize, an act of domestic terror. Now, there's a lot we don't know, but the New York Times says 19 people were injured, and the mayor of Charlottesville saying one person is dead today. Exactly how, we don't know, but someone has died as a result of all this. And the president, at the end of that event, by the way, I went back and looked at President Obama's speech on the night of the Ferguson riots. There was no talk about the stock market. There was no,
a few years ago.
There wasn't talk about Foxconn. There was no talk about jobs in this country. In that speech, just now, President Trump, there were questions shouted at him. Reporters said, "Do you want the support of these white nationalist groups?" And he didn't answer. And he was also asked, "Would you call this terrorism, sir?" And he didn't answer. And I just mentioned that, Anna, because there's a lot the president hasn't addressed today that I think now he's going to be under increased pressure to try to address as these protests continue in Charlottesville.
And one thing that is very hypocritical is when Barack Obama was president, he was accused of not calling Muslims Islamic radicals.
Exactly.
By this current sitting president. But here we are looking at these radicals on national televisions demonstrating violence, and in return they're meeting people who themselves are responding to violence, and He says nothing. Be specific. Call it what it is. Now, here's the thing I also want to note. This is not a political issue for me and many of us who are having this conversation across the country. This is about right and wrong. It's not going to be politicized. It is about what we're currently seeing in this nation, and there's emerging evidence and research to suggest that you have just as much as dislike and hatred towards those who are part of different parties, Democrat and Republican, as you do with race. Both of them are wrong, but we're dividing ourselves to the right and to the left, and we're forgetting that we're American citizens. This where an American president has to take a stand, and one of the best things he could do at this point, in this juncture, is ask for a fair, equitable investigation into what took place here today for all people, both those on the right and those on the left. But let's be fair and equitable about it. And that's what he should ask of his Attorney General to do.
Everybody,
today.
Thank you. Stand by, stay with me as we continue our breaking news coverage of the scene unfolding right now in Charlottesville, Virginia.
This is